complete media blackout of these events. Palestinians have been pleading for help for over 75 years, but the media continue to silence the despair and oppression, even today. Only with the power of social media is the world gathering up to stand up for Palestine. You don't need to be a Muslim to support Palestine. You don't even need to be Palestinian. But if you're a human with any sort of morality, don't just simply, don't stop with this protest. The killing of children in Palestine has been happening for decades. It'll keep going on until we the people do something to stop it. Help in any way you can, not just for the freedom of Palestinian people, whose only demand is the right to freedom, a right to live, a right to breathe, but to ensure that each and every child has a guarantee to not be shot in the head, to not be buried in the tons of rubble, and to not have to fear for their own life. Thank you.
Okay, so next we were supposed to have Salma, a student here at the university, but she was unable to make it, so Zara will be reading her speech.
So yeah, just so you all know, this is Salma Al-Najjar's speech. She's a student at the university. She's a freshman. She's a Muslim. The fight that Palestinians have been battling against Israel has been going on for the past 73 years. It is only now that the discourse has changed due to the powerful influence of social media. It took people to post dehumanizing photos and videos of the attacks they face in order for people to listen. Palestinian voices have been silenced through the media for years, and even this campus has a history of shutting down and silencing Palestinian voices as well, and its lack of support for this cause is harrowing. We have gotten to the point where people in Palestine have to prove they are being killed, and even then, people want to villainize their deaths. On Tuesday, the management of CNN told its employees to use the term Hamas run when describing the Gaza Ministry of Health when declaring the death toll of Palestinians, in an effort to dehumanize their lives and make all the martyrs look like terrorists who deserved it. Gaza is one of the most densely populated cities in the world, and Israel, the apartheid state that it is, knows exactly what it is doing by launching hundreds of tanks, missiles, and warplanes into Gaza. This is a well-planned, well-intended massacre on the people of Gaza. Netanyahu said that they'll keep bombing Gaza till it's silent. It's important to realize how imperative it is to call out the media and tell the situation as it is. What is happening in Palestine is a genocide, and that Israel is committing ethnic cleansing against Palestine. It is not conflict, it is not a war, because that would entail that both sides are equal, when they are clearly not. In the past 2 weeks, Israel has launched 1,450 airstrikes against Gaza. Over 260 Palestinians have been killed, with 70 of those being children, and 2,000 wounded. The Israeli occupation has led to severe damage estimated $210 million, with 1,005 residential units damaged totally. 132 residential towers and buildings were completely destroyed. 68 governmental facilities bombed. 36 schools and primary health clinics were damaged, and 33 media institutions totally crumbled. It has gotten to the point that the people in Gaza would much rather Israel to group them all together and bomb them all at once, instead of having to suffer through the constant torture of witnessing each family member being murdered one at a time. While in Israel, on the other hand, there have been 12 people murdered. 2 of them were children, and 796 injured, with no residential or public buildings destroyed. The stark difference between the two statistics clearly show that there is no absolute way that this can be described as a war or conflict. It is because of the war crimes that Israel has committed against Palestinians that there cannot be 2 states. That coexistence will never be possible, because how can you ask the people that are being oppressed to live side by side with their oppressor? And in light of the destruction, all of the destruction and murder, the U.S. has not only blocked international actions against Israeli aggression once, but 3 times in the past week, without thinking of the indigenous people murdered by American settler colonialism. Israel and its allies love to use the excuse that Hamas sent rockets, and therefore it has the right to defend itself, while forgetting that it caused it in the first place. It was because of Israel's ethnic cleansing of Sheikh Jarrah and forcibly and illegally evicting 6 families from their homes with no fair trial. Biden is a demented, psychopathic child killer who is now selling is now selling $735 million in weapons to Israel to help further Israel's heinous crimes. This bill hasn't been approved yet by Congress. Please text PFTDZN to 50409 to contact our local reps, who are Rodney Davis, Dick Durbin, and Tammy Duckworth. To keep supporting the fight for Palestinians and their human rights, boycott Israeli products, support the BDS movement, center Palestinian voices, and continue to protest Israeli terror. The rights and freedoms of Palestinians deserve to be fought for, and we will continue to advocate for them until Palestine is free!
Okay, so next we're going to be having Rowan, and she'll be reading a poem.
Hi, assalamu alaikum. I'm Rowan, and this is a poem that I wrote called Palestine, My Beloved Home. From the river to the sea, my home is not free, but one day it will be. My Palestinian roots go as deep as the olive trees. I come from a family who say Chinefa. I argue with others when they say Kinefa. Either way, we are the same. We stand here together preaching to reclaim. I stand here today having so much to gain, going mentally insane in a world where the Palestinian people are suffering through so much pain. As the death count rises, it becomes even more inhumane. As airstrikes, gunshots, injuries, and deaths by Israeli forces put against the Palestinian people happening across the ocean. So we need to fight against the injustice and start a commotion. We are here today to cause a change. We need to cause the ignorant minds to rearrange. The things the Palestinians have to endure are wrong, but the people of Palestine are so very strong. We need to show that the Palestinians belong. This 73-year occupation has gone on for far too long. I can't even go back home without having the slightest fear. Seeing all these Israeli soldiers covered up in gear, all I want to do is burst into tears. My people back home are what I'm here for. This is not a war we can no longer ignore. This is an illegal occupation on my beloved home.
Okay, so the next person to be giving a speech is Sara.
Hello, my name is Sara Hijab, and I'm going to be talking about the destruction of Palestinian homes, how it affected them, and ways you can help. Since 1948, the Israeli government has been destroying and misplacing millions of Palestinians. Just in Gaza alone, there are 1,000 individual homes completely destroyed, 700 have been severely damaged, and 14,000 homes partially damaged. The amount of refugees in camps is unbelievable. In Buruj camp, 43,000 refugees. In Jabalia camp, 88,700 refugees. In Deir el-Balah, 113,000 refugees. In Maghhazi camp, 31,000 refugees. Khan Yunis, 235,000 refugees. In Nusrat, 161,000 refugees. In Rafah camps, 224,000 refugees. The worst thing about this list is the fact that Gaza only holds 24% of Palestinian refugees, whereas Jordan holds about 40%. So if you think those numbers are bad, the numbers in Jordan are unimaginable. Adding on to that damage, supplies such as water, electricity, food, clothing, medicine, and the basic things we need to live have been cut off to the Palestinians. There's been a blockade since 2007, which means the borders are blocked and specific items are banned from export and import, including farmers' produce and medical equipment to treat Gaza's wounded. There has been some good news though. Israel is ceasing fire. I wrote this speech about a week ago, but just this morning, my dad told me that the Israeli government has launched an attack on an apartment building filled with children, grandparents, and families just in general. The Israeli government only gave them 5 minutes to evacuate. 5 minutes to evacuate, to get everything, to get all your family out of here, all the items that you need to live. And when they were told 5 minutes is not enough, they told the residents that they are not asking, they are demanding, and they don't care for their opinion. But even though this is happening, it is very important. This is still a very important time to donate and help the Palestinian people as much as you can. Here are some ways you can do so. Of course, what you're doing right now is a great way to help the Palestinian people. By showing your support, going to protests, reposting, and spreading awareness about what's going on is very important and helps out a lot. especially since this issue is so rarely talked about in the media, and when it's brought up, they never speak about or show what the Palestinians are going through. Another way you can help is donating. There are many places and websites you can donate to. You can search up where to donate to Palestine, and many websites where you can donate money will pop up. Here are some websites I've found. Arena, ARENA, UNRWA, and Islamic Fund Relief. If you are looking to help with food, hygiene products, and medicine, the best way to do so is going to these sites where they have it all organized. There's a drop-down menu in which you can scroll through and pick where you want your money to go to. The next way you can help is call your state representative with this phone number, 202-224-3121. Put in your zip code and you should be transferred to your state representative. Once they answer or you go to an answering machine, you state your name and demand that they co-sponsor AOC's resolution to end the $735 million sale to Israel and to co-sponsor the Palestinian Children and Families Act, HR 2590. I did this the other day and it took less than 5 minutes. You can do this as many times as you want. I urge you to do this since it doesn't take up too much time or money and it's very effective. Even if yourself cannot help out or do these things, tell your friends and families, post about it on social media, spread the word to whoever you can. If you aren't able to do any of these, maybe someone else can. It's very important to use Israel ceasing fire to our advantage. Thank you.
Okay, so our next speaker is Fozia, and she's from Gaza.
If I don't take it, someone else will. This is the phrase heard over and over in Sheikh Jarrah, one of the many West Bank neighborhoods threatened and forcibly occupied by Zionist settlers since the 60s. With the support of Israeli forces that we fund, Zionist settlers take the homes of indigenous Palestinians living in land rightfully theirs according to international law. Yet Israel violates this law and many others, not just in regards to the displacement of Palestinians on their own land, but also with using poisonous gases banned in international law on Palestinian civilians, bombing universities, hospitals, media buildings, all clear international war crimes in the name of self-defense. It is one thing to be aware of and to condemn these violations of human rights. Yet by allowing $4 billion of our taxes to go to funding this apartheid, as called by the UN, by not acting against these violations, we are complicit. When we supplied the very weapons used to trash the Al-Aqsa Mosque, we violated the sacred institution of faith. When we allowed the Israeli state to place a siege under Gaza and the West Bank, and to prevent a Palestinian government to serve the Palestinian people in their own territories, we violate the most venerated pinnacle of democracy that we claim to protect, the right to your own government and representation in your own government. We must recognize the privilege and burden we all have when we consciously choose to ally ourselves with common human morality that transcends religion, race, and nationality, rather than blindly following one's own government policies. Today, we speak not simply for Palestinians, but for humanity.
Okay, next we'll be having Zoya.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoya. I'm a sophomore and I'm a member of the Muslim American Youth Organization. Today I'm going to be sharing a list of companies that are profiting off of Palestinian oppression. Economic pressure to Israel is a form of civil resistance to Israeli occupation, colonialism, and apartheid. It is unrealistic of me to ask you to cut all ties with these brands. However, I ask you to be simply mindful of your consumption. The first company is Pampers Diapers. The second company is Victoria's Secret. Third company is Volvo. Fourth, Intel. Fifth, Sabra Hummus. Sixth, Motorola. Seventh, SodaStream. Eighth, McDonald's. 9th, Puma, 10th, Pillsbury. Again, it is unrealistic to assume the complete removal of these companies from your respective lives is achievable. However, the more awareness we spread, the larger the positive impact. Thank you for coming today, and thank you for being here.
Okay, so the next speaker is Zahra.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum everyone. I am the leader and founder of the Muslim American Youth Organization. And I'm just going to be talking a little bit about what's been going on recently. A few days ago, a ceasefire was called between Israel and Hamas, ending the 11 days of bombing that led to the death of over 250 Palestinians in Gaza. Palestinians across the West Bank and East Jerusalem were celebrating. But even with these celebrations and moments of joy, there's an underlying feeling of dread. Because the truth is, things are far from over. The ceasefire is not the first of its kind, and it does not guarantee the safety of Palestinians in Gaza or anywhere else in Palestine, and we've seen that to be true already. The court ruling calling for the eviction of families in Sheikh Jarrah has yet to be annulled, meaning multiple Palestinian families are still set to be expelled from their homes. The occupation is still ongoing, and Palestine has yet to be free, meaning our work is not done. What is happening right now has been going on for decades. Before Sheikh Jarrah, there have been numerous other neighborhoods where Palestinians have been forcefully and violently expelled from their homes. According to the UNRWA, there are over 5 million Palestinian refugees globally. That means 1 in 3 refugees is Palestinian. This illegal occupation has been going on for longer than most of us have been alive. Although we did not see the start of this crisis, inshallah, God willing, we will be the generation who sees the end of it. As a Muslim, but more importantly, as a human being, I am disgusted by the actions of the Israeli government. This is not a political issue, but rather one of human rights. If you choose to be neutral on this issue and stay silent, then you are contributing to the oppression of Palestinian people and normalizing the war crimes committed by Israel. It's not a two-sided conflict when one side receives billions of dollars yearly from the US government and has one of the strongest militaries in the world. Therefore, it is our duty to stand up for Palestine. Coming to this protest is a start, but we need to take further action if we want to see change. Donate to the organizations out there that are providing aid to Palestine, and put pressure on our government to stop aiding Israeli war crimes. We'll be sharing a list of action items with you all through a QR code after the speeches, so you can know where to donate, what petitions to sign, who to call, and what to say to them. We must continue to keep talking, because if we become silent, we become complicit. We will continue to fight for justice until all of Palestine is free.
Next, we're going to have Serene speaking.
Hi everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Cool. My name is Serene. I'm an abolitionist organizer here on campus with Defund UIPD. Shout out Defund. But I speak to you today first and foremost as a Palestinian. And one thing that's pretty obvious about my community is that we're all really proud of our heritage and our identity. It's why we choose to wear these kufiyas in 80-degree weather. It's why whenever I introduce myself, it's always my name followed by my bloodline. I am Palestinian, and simply stating that fact is revolutionary. We have a saying in my community that says, Al-wujud muqawama, which means existence is resistance. For 73 years, the Zionist state has attempted to erase my people off the face of the earth, and yet here I stand telling you that I am Palestinian. I am native to the city of Ramallah, where my grandmother was displaced after settlers rained hell on our village. They demanded that she disappear, take a bus to Jordan, and simply never return. But my grandmother chanted no in vulgar language. Her blood, stubborn, trailed west to Ramallah, where military checkpoints trapped us in every direction, and she could no longer visit family 10 miles away in Jerusalem. But still, she would say, Alhamdulillah, thank God, because at least we are still here, still existing, building homes, breathing life in a Zionist state that is meant to suffocate us. Let me say that again. The Zionist state is meant to suffocate us. No ceasefire will change that, because a ceasefire under apartheid just means more violence, more forced expulsions, more illegal Zionist settlements. That's why when the ceasefire was announced, I texted my friend, told her the victory feels bittersweet. She agrees because we know that Palestinians in Gaza will continue to struggle under a 15-year military blockade with little to no clean water or electricity. 60,000 Gazan Palestinians have been displaced in 2 weeks, and families torn apart by death will be left to make sense of a life without loved ones. So no, a ceasefire brings no relief for us. And in the West Bank, a ceasefire means that Palestinian workers will still wake up at 4 in the morning. They will wait for hours at a Zionist military checkpoint surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers. Their 20-minute commute to work turns into 2 hours or possibly 3 because it's ever elongated by the apartheid wall, staring at us, mocking us. We wait at the checkpoint like cattle left out for slaughter. And all the while we watch Zionist settlers drive past with ease. No need to check their IDs, to stand between barbed wire and be humiliated by an IOF soldier, their eyes piercing into you from the other side of a bulletproof barrier. And even after a ceasefire, Palestinian political prisoners will continue to sit behind bars without any form of legal representation. The IOF captures Palestinians indiscriminately. In February, my former dance instructor, Ata Khattab, was taken by the Zionist militia in the middle of the night. In the Zionist court system, 99% of cases end up with a guilty verdict. No, this is not a rhetorical exaggeration. This is an actual statistics. They didn't even convict Ata of any crime because they don't need to. And a ceasefire will not free Ata, nor will it free any of the other Palestinian prisoners who are held hostage by a Zionist state that charges Palestinians with the crime of simply existing. And while growing up in Palestine, I understood these as facts of life. But now that I live here, it feels odd to explain them to you. And it feels odd for my friends back home to tell me that the Zionist state becomes more suffocating with every breath. And I noticed this when I went to Palestine again in 2018. For the first time in 2 years, I heard the call to prayer from a mosque down the street and drank tea with my family. We sat under grape leaves. I waved hi to my neighbor who left a bag of figs at the gate to welcome me home. But the joys of my reunion quickly faded when I realized that the air in my city felt tighter, the streets more narrow, and when I looked into people's eyes, I could visibly see the exhaustion accumulate. From my grandmother's kitchen window, I count the Zionist settlements perched on a hill across from us. I scoff because these settlements are illegal under international law, and yet there they sit, staring at me, audaciously, as my aunt opens the window. Look the air in, she says, because the view is suffocating. My chest tightens when I count even more settlements than I did in 2016. And if I return next summer to the same Zionist state, then I will count even more settlements than I did in 2018. And I know that if we continue to do nothing, if we continue to blatantly lie by calling this a conflict, if our own university continues to fund lethal Israeli military weapons, then one day my city will be swallowed whole. One day my city will be swallowed whole, and all that I would have left would be the keys to my grandmother's home, and I would show them to my Palestinian nephews and tell them how our family used to drink tea and sit under grape leaves and wave hi to our neighbor who left figs at the gate. And I hate to even say the thought aloud, but I have to because it's a fear that's rooted into Palestinians everywhere. All of us, we are all in a constant battle against forgetfulness and complete erasure. We could see this happening right now in the heart of Jerusalem, where Palestinian natives of Sheikh Jarrah resist against forceful expulsion from their homes, and the threat of expulsion is nothing new. In 2009, the Ghawi and Hanun families of Sheikh Jarrah were permanently displaced from their homes, kicked out in the middle of the night. They were still wearing pajamas, not even given enough time to put on their shoes. Their furniture thrown away, and in a matter of a single night, they were dispossessed from the homes that they belonged to for generations. Months after the displacement, they lived in a tent across the street. They watched Zionist settlers from Long Island, New York, take over their bedrooms, cook in their kitchens, pick lemons off the tree that their grandmother planted decades ago. And these expulsions are deemed legal by the Israeli colonial courts because they claim that the homes of Sheikh Jarrah supposedly do not have building permits. But every Palestinian knows that building permits are impossible to come by. My own city of Ramallah can't even get a building permit to get a functioning sewage system. And it took my city decades to get a permit from Israel to build a cemetery to house the dead. So of course they won't give us permits to house the living, to build homes for the Palestinian families that are so stubborn and in love with life because Zionism wants us dead. So no, permits do not make this a legal case, especially because the grandmothers of Sheikh Jarrah are older than the Zionist state itself. Do not dare ask them for permits when their footsteps have Jerusalem memorized. The wrinkles creasing at the corner of their eyes carry more history and culture than the Zionist state ever has. And maybe some of this sounds familiar to you. Maybe when I speak about the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, you remember the displacement of indigenous people and this settler colony that they call the United States. You would be right to make that connection because Palestine is the intersection for all marginalized communities. I remember the tear gas canisters that suffocated black freedom fighters in Ferguson were exactly the same ones that were thrown outside my school in Ramallah, manufactured by the same company. The police department guilty of murdering George Floyd attended conferences hosted by the IOF, a terrorizing militia that trains your local police officers on how to perfect oppressive techniques. And growing up, I knew that America and Israel were one and the same because when we drove past military zones, I noticed the Jeeps were imprinted with US flags too. Both America and Israel are settler colonies at different stages of conquest. In America, forced expulsion no longer happens through the ethnic cleansing, but through mass incarceration of black and brown communities. And we could see Israel already implementing these tactics. A minority of Palestinians have an Israeli citizenship. You may know them from the media as Arab Israelis, but no, that's an erasure of identity. So we call them the Palestinians who live in 48, because the land they live on is in fact Palestinian land conquested in 1948. And if Israel were actually the shining democracy of the Middle East, then Palestinians with Israeli citizenship would have equal rights. Instead, they are subjected to living in slums where the government sends drugs and weapons into Palestinian neighborhoods, does not fund their schools or their communities. This is glaringly similar to how the US criminalizes black and brown bodies here in this country. We fight a shared struggle against the same settler colonial system using the same settler colonial tactics. And sometimes I wake up to videos of armed settlers roaming the streets of 48 Palestine, pointing their guns at innocent families, terrorizing them, chasing them, dancing over their dead bodies, burning Palestinian homes, injuring children asleep, still singing lullabies. Clearly, Israeli citizenship will not protect us. And I stop myself from sharing these videos that I wake up to because their faces, terrified, traumatized, are more than just images. They are more than just props trying to prod the rest of the world awake from its slumber. I will not broadcast the trauma that all Palestinians carry to guilt you into caring because these words should simply be enough. My words should simply be enough for you to see that Palestinians are not asking for literal solutions. Or peaceful coexistence because peace is impossible under an apartheid state predicated on the erasure of my people. We know the entire system is rotten. We know Israeli citizenship will never protect us from armed settlers because the state is its settlers. And if the settlers live on another hill, then I at least won't have to suffer through them spitting at my face. But if they live across the street, then I will be subjected to the same lynchings and armed killings that Palestinians in 48 face all the time. So instead, we demand liberation, and there is no reiteration that I could water this down to suit you. And in this country, I know that these words can get me in trouble. Palestinians who resist against apartheid get fired, their lives threatened. And I know the next time I go to Palestine, the Zionists will investigate me longer than they usually do. But I would be lucky if that's all they put me through. I will be lucky if they don't ask me to strip down my clothes and pose for the security cameras, because that's a reality so many Palestinian women have lived. And despite this, we sit and watch the rest of the world be tricked into believing that Israel is a progressive, supposedly inclusive state. But they won't tell you that Ethiopian Jewish women are forcefully sterilized by the state because their blackness isn't compatible with the white supremacist Zionist ideology. And even though Israeli cities have some of the largest pride parades, they won't tell you that the Zionist state blackmails queer Palestinians, threatening to out them if they don't follow the military's demands. And again, these words can get me in trouble because language is powerful, crucial. Journalists half a world away spin in their office chairs and utter the words Arab-Israeli conflict or religious clashes, carelessly, never bearing the brunt of its effects, but Palestinians do. Language has always been weaponized against us. So please, non-Palestinians, call it what it is: settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing. Let them know that you're smart enough to see through Zionist propaganda. Don't allow the Zionists in our classrooms to debate my right to existence. Don't let them speak about the lives of Palestinians as if they are mere talking points to win an academic debate. It's absolutely disgusting. Palestinians are tired of it. We will no longer use the oppressor's language to describe our struggle. In these past 2 weeks, I've witnessed Palestinians take control of the narrative like never before, and it has to keep going. The responsibility of non-Palestinians is to uplift us. Mainstream media won't broadcast our real stories, so I ask that each of you use whatever platform you have. Palestinians are literally risking their lives to bring truth to light. It's our job to show them that we can see. I can't emphasize enough the importance of media and how much it threatens the Zionist state. Last week, journalist offices in Gaza crumbled to the ground from Israeli airstrikes. This was an intentional target, so clearly the media is powerful and we must use it to our advantage. Further, none of the atrocities committed by the Zionist state would be possible without our tax dollars. The IOF receives $4 billion of aid from the US, and the money comes directly from our pockets. So yes, as Americans, we are not just complicit if we are silent, we are actively guilty. So I urge that you call your representatives, tell them you will not stand to fund an ethnic cleansing, tell them people here in their own country are dying from medical neglect, from homelessness, domestic violence, gun violence, suicide, the list goes on. Why in the hell would they be funding lunchboxes for IOF soldiers when kids in this country go to school hungry? If you are a student at U of I, you should know that your tuition dollars fund Israeli military weapons. The university invests in companies that produce the weapons that terrorize my people. So last week during final season, when Palestinians on campus were struggling with our mental health more than ever before, we knew that the university would not send its condolences. Even if they did, it would be contradictory because they cannot tell me I'm sorry that your people are being killed at gunpoint when this administration invests in companies that hold the trigger. So as students, we have to pressure our university to divest from weapons of ethnic cleansing and instead invest in the well-being of students in the larger Champaign-Urbana community. Our tuition dollars could instead be funding transformative justice centers. It could be used to recruit more therapists of color from marginalized students on this campus. It will be difficult to get our institutions and our governments to divest from the Zionist military, so we must also take responsibility directly. Palestinians call for a targeted boycott against products that are made in illegal colonial settlements. These products exploit the water and the land that belong to the indigenous Palestinian people. Palestinians completely lose access to precious resources just so that foreign consumers can buy appropriated versions of Palestinian food in American grocery markets. All you have to do is look up BDS movement, what to boycott. It will give you a list of 8 corporations that make products on stolen Palestinian land. It's only 8, and it's a simple but highly effective way that you can individually resist against Zionist settler colonialism. So I wasn't really sure how to end this except with a hopeful tone. You know, growing up Palestinian, I thought that the rest of the world would never understand. I thought that the media was so far gone and the language that they used was so lethal. And when I moved here in 2016, I felt more silenced than ever. But now I realize that my voice is only in my hands and I will do with it what I please. And although the past 2 weeks have been very difficult, I've seen more global solidarity with the Palestinian community than ever before. Protests in Chicago, London, South Africa, Algeria, all of them saying loud and clear that we will not let settler colonialism win. So I want y'all to do the same. Repeat after me. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.
Okay, so next we'll be having Sarah from an organizer from PSL.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. So have you ever heard someone say something along the lines of, oh, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is thousands of years old? I've definitely heard that. I've heard that the so-called conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has been going on since time immemorial and that it's silly to think that it could be ended. Well, first of all, we must be clear that this is not a conflict between two equal sides. It is a puppet regime of Western imperialism imposing apartheid and genocide on the Palestinian people, and the Palestinian people, in spite of everything, standing up every time they're knocked down and continuing to resist for almost a century. And second, this system of apartheid isn't thousands of years old. This myth seeks to put it outside of history and frames it as some sort of natural state of the universe, obscuring the fact that the oppression of the Palestinian people, like all oppressions, is not natural. It has historical roots in class society, is maintained by capitalism in the service of capitalist interests, and can and will be overthrown. Ever since Western imperialism officially endorsed the Zionist project with the British Balfour Declaration of 1917, Western imperialist support for Israel has been purely in service of capitalist ambitions. Capitalism requires constant growth, meaning that it is not enough for large companies to exploit the labor resources and markets of their own countries. They must look beyond their own borders in order to conquer the labor, resources, and markets needed to maintain this constant growth. So the imperial powers backed a fringe movement to colonize Palestine in hopes of creating a dependent and therefore dependable ally to protect their access to the labor markets and resources of the Middle East, most importantly oil. The first significant returns on this colonial investment came in 1956, when Israel aided Britain and France in their bid to recolonize the Suez Canal. When Egypt defied imperialism by nationalizing the Suez Canal, British and French capitalists were not willing to lose control over their passage to the labor resources and markets of Asia. While Britain, France, and Israel were eventually forced to withdraw under international pressure, this episode illustrated the usefulness of Israel for maintaining imperial dominance in the region. To this day, Israel continues to serve as an outpost for U.S. domination in the Middle East. As now President Joe Biden said candidly of Israel in 1986, "It is the best $3 billion investment we make. If there weren't an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interests in the region." In addition to protecting U.S. interests against political movements in the Middle East that would seek to defy U.S. imperialism, Israel serves capitalist interests as a lucrative market and testing ground for U.S. weapons. The U.S.'s most recent military aid package to Israel gives Israel $38 billion in aid over the next 10 years, or 2016, 2026, 5 years in. Where are we? Sorry. These weapon sales are more valuable to arms manufacturers than just the price of the bombs and planes that Israel purchases. Military equipment sells better if it can be advertised as battle-tested. When weapons companies sell to Israel, they know that their products will be used, and that they'll get that battle-tested label. This is the brutality of imperialism. The good news is that in Palestine and all around the world, the people are resisting. In the past few weeks, Palestinians from all parts of Palestine, the West Bank, Gaza, Jerusalem, and within the 1948 borders of Israel, rose up to demand an end to the ethnic cleansing in Sheikh Jarrah and the slaughter in Gaza. In Italy, dock workers refused to load weapons onto a ship bound for Israel. Dock workers in South Africa refused to offload cargo from an Israeli ship. Millions around the world have joined protests in solidarity with the Palestinian people. No system of oppression is natural or inevitable. All oppression in Palestine and everywhere in the world exists in history and will be defeated in history. It has a beginning and an end. The working and oppressed masses of the world will defeat capitalism and all oppressive systems that uphold it, including Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, all forms of racism, and patriarchy. But in order to win, we need unbreakable international solidarity. Those of us living in the United States, in the heart of world imperialism, have a crucial role to play in defeating world imperialism. We have immense power. Without the backing of US and capitalism, the Israeli apartheid regime does not stand a chance. All power to the people, free Palestine, and down with imperialism.
Okay, so we have 2 speeches left, and next is Matt from PSL.
Hello everybody, my name is Matt. I'm with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And as a socialist, I stand against all forms of imperialism, all forms of apartheid, all forms of colonialism. And it's important to recognize that we stand on stolen land here today, land that has belonged to indigenous peoples far before people that looked like me got here. Tribes like the Peoria, far too many that I could list, honestly. And, sorry. It's inevitable that capitalists are going to stand with capitalists, right? The white settlers that went into Palestine in 1948 and forcibly displaced over 700,000 Palestinian people in less than a few months did not care for the people that they were displacing because they did not see them as equal. They did not see them as people. And it is this strain of thought that we have to continue to fight against every day, not only because it is just, but because it is absolutely necessary if we're going to survive as a human race. We are not going to make it. We are not going to make it if this continues. And I cannot stress enough what everybody else has said already. So much has been said already, I have so little left to say. But I want to emphasize that us standing here on university ground, or no, reappropriated ground, is not simply a symbolic action. The university does, as has been mentioned already, directly contribute materially to Israeli apartheid in Palestine. There is a Caterpillar research lab right down the street that is used to help develop better construction equipment that is later sold to the Israelis and used to bulldoze Palestinian homes. This is where companies like Raytheon and Eldit come to develop and recruit engineers so that they can make better bombs to drop on Palestinians. This is absolutely despicable, and we need to stand up every day, I was told not to curse, every day, and say that is not right. Obviously that is not right. And honestly, apartheid and white supremacy is probably the one thing that the US government is happy to cross the aisle about, right? The one thing. Bush, Biden, Obama, Trump, all of them said that they would continue to support the $4 billion alone in military aid, not not all the money, just in military aid that was sent to Israel every year. Absolutely despicable. I don't even know what to say about that. It's disgusting. Now, bipartisanship, has absolutely nothing to do with it. It has to do with the fact that America has a vested interest in the continuation of settler colonialism in Palestine. Israel stands as a projection of American power in the Middle East.
Yep.
It is a nuclear-powered watchdog over any other state that would seek to stand against U.S. imperialism. There's no other way to say it. And not only that, as if the cops here weren't racist enough, as if the pigs here weren't repressive enough, we see things like the deadly exchange programs, in which cops from cities all over the United States get to have a field trip to Israel and see how they oppress their people there, so that they can take it back and practice it here. That is where we get our racial profiling in airports. That is where we get things like skunk spray, which is designed to nauseate and cause protesters to vomit. And that is where they test their weapons. Things like tear gas, new pepper spray, new assault rifles. Every single day being tested for US capitalists in Palestine. Absolutely. And I got up here and a lot of people said a lot of great things, a lot of better words than I can say. So I think that I'm just going to end with, we've had enough. I think Palestinians have obviously, had enough since the fucking occupation started in the first goddamn place. And so I stand in solidarity with all oppressed peoples, solidarity with Palestine, free Palestine, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so our last speech will be given by Dua, a local Palestinian community member.
Assalamu alaikum and peace be unto you all. I wanted to give a huge shout out to everybody that organized this, to all the collaborators. You might have seen me with a megaphone. I wasn't in charge of any of this. I'm just helping out on the side. So a huge shout out to Mayo and everybody that helped out. There's a few organizations involved. So everybody, please give them a shout out.
Yeah.
There was a lot of behind the scenes work on everybody's part. So I want to thank everybody that is here. Huge shout out to everybody that is here. Thank you to everyone that helped spread the word. And thank you to everyone that supports the Palestinian cause, whether or not they can make it out today. Obviously, those that can make it out to the protests, to the rallies are really important, but it doesn't stop or end there. It doesn't start or end there. And that's because rallies help get the word out, but we just can't stop here. Basically, unfortunately, as Palestinians, as those that support the Palestinian cause, we have to live by this mantra, can't stop, won't stop. We will be out here, whether it's physically or whether we're online or whether we're talking to people, we will continue to organize. I have been organizing for Palestinian rights since my undergrad years. So I was out there, not here, I didn't go to UIUC, I went to MSU, Michigan State University, just a few hours away. We were out in 2008, we were out in 2014, we were out in 2018. But we can't only, and we're out here again now in Champaign because that's where I live, in 2021. But we can't only come out when there's an escalation. We can't only be out here when things get really bad.
Yeah.
A ceasefire was called on Thursday, and just a few hours afterwards, what did we see? Israeli soldiers back in Masjid al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third most holiest site for Muslims, and Israel does not have jurisdiction over it. A few days later, you saw Israeli soldiers accompanying Israeli settlers and Israeli citizens into the mosque. You don't even know why. The siege on Gaza is still there. Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood is still surrounded and forces are intensifying. If you follow any of the voices on the ground in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood like Muhammad al-Kurd and his sister Muna al-Kurd, you'll see things are getting worse in that neighborhood. They're not better now that there's a ceasefire. In 2014, I wasn't able to organize like I had in 2018, and I felt a sense of helplessness. I wrote a poem for Gaza then, for Gaza, and I'm gonna share it just so you can see that I could have written it today and it would have been the same exact thing. That's how cyclical this violence is. It's called Dear Gaza. Dear Gaza, I beg you not to take my silence for apathy. My inaction is not a sign of neutrality. I want to respond. I feel your agony. I'm sick of the anti-Semitic blasphemy, the Israel must defend herself fallacy, all of it from everyone, Western, Eastern, and Arab policy. Humans tossed aside, souls without lives, kids without moms, dads without wives, nothing left, not even trees or cattle survives. I hurt for you and I cry for justice, to the return of our moral compass. As the Arabs would say, are we all just bloodless? How do we turn off all ears and eyes as their cries fill our clear skies? But I get it, it's so much easier to dehumanize. They're the enemy on the other side, wrapped in black and white, they're vilified. Or maybe you are terrified and then humanity eats you up inside. Like the blood is too much to handle and your heart is heavy, heavier than an anvil. You're only you and it's all just too much for you to tackle. It's like, where does one start? Is it best to take the occupation apart or perhaps analyze the apartheid wall's art? What about the numbers part by part? For example, in 1918, a British mandate sought to find the Jews an Israeli state. This became a reality in 1948, and that was game over, checkmate. They rolled in with guns and tanks saying, yep, I'll take that and that, thanks, which started up a toll at the United Nations with over 77 violations. Or maybe you just want to forget history, so let's talk about today. Like the 90% living in poverty, the destroyed buildings and streets of the city, all funded by your hard-earned money. Bet you never knew that. Isn't that funny? An entire people living under $1 on a piece of land that's only getting smaller at the mercy of a foreign controller that runs water, land, and everything from border to border. An open-air prison is what they call it. Yeah, it's that bad. And we Americans, we pay for it. And before you lose all hope and quit, let me tell you that, yes, you can help. You see, the tides are turning and the masses are learning. We've been blind for too long, but justice is returning. And yes, you can play a role. Make learning the conflict a goal, then educate. Maybe donate. Better yet, let your cart do the talking. Understand that it'll take us all, but at the end of the day, it's your call. Will you take a stand for justice? Thank you. I wrote this poem because you could see a small, tiny sliver of hope in the change in the media, in the narrative. I was hopeful, but here we are now in 2021. It is literally the same exact thing. And the Palestinian struggle is where it's been. Actually, it's probably a little bit worse, as Sireen was mentioning, with more settler colonies and less Palestinian-owned land. And yes, we are seeing a continuing change in the narrative because we are able to hear the voices of those on the ground in Palestine. There is a shifting tide, but my friends, we need a tsunami. And as Americans, we play a very great role. And I know we're getting tired. I am exhausted. But we have a privilege here and we have to keep the conversation going. We have to stay informed and we have to stay informing. We have to stay loud, we have to get personal, we have to keep it moving. Don't be afraid to take this conversation offline as well. So, a lot of people shared a lot of information here today. And hopefully you guys learned a lot of new things. I certainly did, even as a Palestinian myself. But what do we do next? You heard a lot of action points and you might be feeling a little confused right now. Where do I start? First, there's a QR code going around from the organizers with a list of things. I'm going to talk about 3 of those things that in my opinion, but obviously everybody has their own opinion, that are very, very important. Soon, Congress will be voting on 3 different bills. There is HR 2590, which will prevent taxpayer money from funding Israeli terror against Palestinian children and families. There is a bill in the House started by Alexandria Cortez. There is a bill in the Senate started by Bernie Sanders that will stop the almost $1 billion arms deal that Biden promised. We need our senators and representatives to know where we stand. I think every single person that came up here said that. And we say it because it's very important. That is our money that is going over there, and we need to make sure we stand against it, personally, and also all of those that we know. The second, and people have talked about this too, BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions. BDS is a movement started from within the colonized Palestine. This is a movement that they have asked the world to join in on. Sanctions is what took down South African apartheid. We are trying to do the same thing here with the Israeli apartheid. So, when it comes to that, just memorize these few companies. Somebody mentioned they were just a small number. I'm gonna mention the ones that we actually interact with on a regular basis. Sabra hummus. Hopefully nobody's eating that anyway. SodaStream. Ahava Skin Products. I never heard of them, but apparently you shouldn't buy them. Israeli produce, especially for us, Ramadan dates. Pay attention to where your dates are coming from. And these are the 2 that we'll most likely have some interactions with on a personal level, HP and Puma. And so for us, we have to pay attention specifically to these. They're not that hard to replace, but not only do we pay attention for them on a personal level, a lot of us here are in business. We are business owners. We have our own businesses. We interact with other businesses. Let us make sure that the businesses we interact with, that our suppliers are also boycotting these products. I don't think most suppliers are probably using Puma, but HP is a very, very big one. HP provides intel directly to Israel's security forces. HP is everywhere. I was just at the DMV. All of their computers are HP. I have HP printers, which I will be getting rid of. And I'm hoping everybody will follow in that round. I'm a small business owner. I use a local printer here. I'm going to be talking to them about HP. Can we get that same kind of commitment from everybody here? Talk to somebody else about this boycott. And the third thing is we need to control the narrative, and I think others have said this as well. I think it was Serene, we will not be using their language to define our struggle. Feel comfortable using apartheid, occupation, settler colonies. From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Like I said, I know it's tiring. I'm exhausted. You're exhausted. But obviously, we can still be out here. We need to be out here. We will continue to be out here. We have to stay informed and stay informing. Thank you.
That basically wraps up all of our speeches. That's all that we have for you all today. We want to thank you all so much for coming out here to show your support for Palestine. We really appreciate it. I also want to quickly thank all the people who helped us plan and organize this protest, because we wouldn't have been able to do this without them. I want to shout out PSL, because without their supplies and all the help that they gave us with coordinating this today, we wouldn't have been able to do this. I want to shout out SJP and ION CU because they helped us advertise this event. They helped us plan things out so that things could go smoothly today. I want to shout out to the folks at IMC because they were so accommodating and made it really easy for us to use their space and provided us with stuff too. I want to thank CIMIC for also helping provide some supplies for us and for providing us with volunteers as well. For all the people who volunteered and showed up, I want to thank you all so much. And I want to thank my fellow Muslim American Youth Organization members, because without them, we would not have been able to do this. It was our drive that got this done. And also, just thank you all for being here, for showing up. Just thank you for that. And thank you for showing your support for Palestine. And we have a couple leftover QR codes. We're going to be putting them on the table there. So if we didn't get one to you, you can go ahead and grab them there. Thank you.
Here you go, bro. Assalamualaikum.